The first scream didn't come from the jungle. It came from a human. A sharp, breathless gasp cut through the humid afternoon air, slicing the steady rhythm of cicadas and distant bird calls. For a split second, no one moved. Tourists froze mid-step.
No, no!
Cameras
Oh,
hovered
God,
half-raised.
no!
The jungle, vast and indifferent, seemed to pause not in silence, but in attention. Then someone whispered, almost disbelieving, "Oh my God, what is he doing?" A man stood just beyond the worn wooden boundary line, the one clearly marked by signs in three languages. He was smiling, grinning actually. His sunglasses reflected green leaves and filtered sunlight, as if this were just another highlight for his travel reel. In his arms, too small, too fragile to be there, was a baby girl. No one understood how it happened so fast. One moment the infant had been clinging awkwardly near the low brush at the edge of the troop's resting area, watched carefully by its mother and two younger females. The next moment the tourist had stepped forward, ducked under the rope, and scooped the baby up with clumsy excitement, lifting it toward his chest like a prize. The baby stiffened. Its tiny fingers dug into the stranger's shirt. A high, piercing cry tore from its throat, raw, terrified, unmistakable. It wasn't the sound of curiosity or play. It was the sound of danger. That cry didn't fade into the trees. It traveled. It rolled across the forest floor through roots and vines over stones warmed by the sun. It threaded its way through the dense green walls of the habitat, carrying panic with it. And somewhere deeper in the jungle, something massive heard it. At first, the crowd didn't react the way you might expect. There was no immediate chaos, no screaming rush for safety. Instead, there was confusion, pure paralyzing confusion. People leaned forward, not back. Phones came up. A few nervous laughs fluttered through the group, the kind people use when they don't yet understand how close they are to disaster. "Is this part of the tour?" someone asked. A guide turned sharply, his face draining of color. His hand flew to his radio, but he didn't speak yet. His eyes were locked on the man holding the infant, and beyond him, into the thick vegetation where the rest of the troop had gone unnaturally quiet. That was when the jungle changed. The background noise didn't stop. It narrowed. Birds cut off mid-call, leaves stilled. Even the insects seemed to pull back, as if instinct itself had raised a warning flag. The baby gorilla's cry faltered into desperate whimpers, its small chest heaving against the stranger's grip. The tourist finally noticed something was wrong. His smile slipped. He adjusted his hold, awkward and unsure, murmuring something meant to soothe the infant. "Hey, hey. It's okay," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Behind him, a low sound emerged from the trees. It wasn't loud, not yet. It wasn't a roar or a scream. It was deeper than that. A vibration more than a noise, like thunder rolling far underground. A sound that didn't announce itself so much as it warned. The guide felt it before he fully heard it. The ground seemed to tighten beneath his boots. He swallowed hard. "Put the baby down," he said, his voice low, controlled, urgent. "Now!" The tourist turned, blinking, annoyed more than afraid. "Relax," he replied. "I'm just taking a photo." That was the moment the crowd understood something irreversible had happened. Because the sound from the jungle changed. Branches snapped. Leaves exploded outward, as if the forest itself were being pushed aside. A massive shape surged forward, not charging blindly, but moving with terrifying purpose. Nearly 450 pounds of muscle memory and authority broke through the undergrowth. The silverback. He didn't roar as he ran. He didn't scream or beat his chest. His silence was worse. His eyes locked onto the scene in an instant. The human, the baby, the unnatural separation. His stride slowed, deliberate, now every step measured. This wasn't panic, it was assessment. The baby squealed again, reaching out with shaking arms. The tourist's breath hitched. His hands tightened involuntarily, a fatal mistake. He took one step back, then another, instinctively retreating as the silverback closed the distance. "No," the guide hissed. "Don't move." But fear doesn't listen to instructions. The silverback stopped just short of the open clearing. He stood upright, towering, his shadow stretching across the dirt. For a heartbeat, everything hung suspended: the crowd, the baby, the man, the forest itself. This was the point of no return. The silverback's chest expanded slowly. His nostrils flared. He looked not just at the baby, but at the human holding it, reading him, weighing him, deciding. People would later say that was the longest second of their lives. Some would swear they saw rage in his eyes. Others would insist it was grief. A few, shaken to their core, would say it was something far more unsettling: recognition. Whatever it was, one truth settled over the clearing like a heavy fog. A line had been crossed, and the jungle was about to answer. Panic did not explode all at once. It seeped in. At first it moved quietly through tightened throats, through shallow breaths held too long, through the sudden understanding that this was no longer a spectacle. This was a reckoning. The silverback stood at the edge of the clearing, massive shoulders rising and falling with controlled force. His presence bent the space around him. No one spoke. Even the baby gorilla's cries thinned into frightened whimpers, as if instinct told it that silence might be safer than sound. Then someone screamed. It came from behind the crowd, a sharp, uncontrollable shriek that shattered the fragile stillness. That single sound was enough. Panic spread like fire through dry grass. People stumbled backward. Phones dropped into the dirt. A woman grabbed her child and ran, not caring where. Another man froze, completely rooted to the ground, his mouth open but silent. The guide's voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding, but it barely registered. "Everyone stay where you are," he shouted. "Do not run." Too late. The jungle answered the panic immediately. A deep roar erupted from the silverback's chest, not explosive, but overwhelming. It rolled outward, vibrating through bone and blood, through tree trunks and soil. Birds burst from the canopy in frantic flight. The sound wasn't aimed at the crowd. It was aimed at the moment itself, at the rupture that had just occurred. The tourist holding the baby felt his knees weaken. Up close, the infant was trembling violently now, its tiny fingers clawing at his shirt, its face pressed against unfamiliar fabric. The man's bravado collapsed. His breath came in ragged bursts as he stared into the silverback's eyes and finally understood the scale of his mistake. "I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean." The silverback took a step forward. The ground seemed to flinch. That single movement erased any remaining illusion of control. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was momentum. The guide's hand hovered near his emergency flare, but he didn't raise it. Not yet. One wrong move now could tip everything into irreversible violence. The silverback advanced again, slower this time. Every muscle coiled, his fists brushing the dirt. His gaze never left the baby. The infant squealed sharply, twisting in the man's arms. That sound did what no human action could have done. It pushed the moment to the edge. The silverback surged. Not a full charge. Not yet. But enough to break the tourist's resolve. The man cried out and stumbled backward, tripping over a root, losing his balance. The baby slipped from his grip and fell onto the soft earth with a startled cry. Time fractured. The crowd gasped as one. The guide lunged forward instinctively, then stopped himself, knowing he was powerless now. The baby scrambled clumsily toward the nearest tree, panic driving its tiny limbs. The silverback moved instantly. He did not attack the fallen man. He stepped over him as if he were nothing more than a shadow. His focus was absolute. He reached the baby in 2 strides and scooped it up with a gentleness that felt impossible for something so massive. The jungle held its breath. The silverback cradled the infant against his chest. His massive hand curved protectively around its back, shielding it from the world. The baby clung to him, its cries dissolving into soft, broken sounds. Then came the sound no one expected. A low, aching rumble rose from the silverback's chest. It was not anger. It was grief, raw, ancient, unmistakable. The kind of sound that comes from memory, not instinct. The guide felt his stomach drop. "They lost a baby last year," he whispered to the ranger beside him, his voice barely audible. "Poachers. The mother didn't survive." The realization spread like a cold wave. This wasn't just defense. This was mourning colliding with threat. The silverback turned slowly, still holding the infant, and faced the humans. His eyes swept over them, not wildly, not blindly, but with unsettling clarity. He wasn't choosing targets. He was setting boundaries. Behind him, movement rippled through the trees. One by one, the rest of the troop emerged. 2 adult females stepped into view, flanking the silverback without touching him. A younger male positioned himself several yards back, watching the humans intently. A juvenile climbed onto a fallen log, scanning the clearing like a lookout. They weren't charging. They were forming a wall. The guide's breath caught in his chest. He had seen guerrilla defenses before, but never like this. This wasn't chaos, it was coordination. The tourist who had grabbed the baby lay sprawled on the ground, sobbing openly now. His sunglasses were gone, his face streaked with mud and tears. He tried to crawl backward away from the silverback. The silverback's head snapped toward him. A low growl vibrated through the clearing, deep and final. Not a threat. A command. The man froze instantly, pressing his forehead to the dirt. "Do not move," the guide hissed. "If you run, he will chase. And if he chases," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The silverback adjusted his grip on the infant, pulling it closer, his body angling slightly to shield it from the humans. One of the females stepped forward and gently touched the baby's back, checking it, soothing it. The guide felt something heavy settle in his chest. "They're not attacking us," he murmured. "They're protecting him from us." The ranger's radio crackled. Backup was on the way. Tranquilizer teams were being mobilized. The guide shook his head sharply. "Not yet," he said. "If we fire now, we risk everything." The silverback's breathing slowed, but his posture remained rigid. He was holding himself back with visible effort, balancing fury and restraint on a razor's edge. This was the moment where death hovered closest. One wrong sound, one sudden movement, one panicked decision. The crowd, what remained of it, stood frozen, tears streaming down faces they didn't realize were crying. Some dropped to their knees. Others clasped hands. No one filmed now. This had passed beyond curiosity into something sacred and terrifying. The silverback lifted his head and let out a single thunderous roar. Not at the humans, into the jungle. The sound echoed, carrying warning, grief, and resolve deep into the forest. When it faded, he lowered his head, pressing his brow gently against the infant's. The message was clear. The jungle had answered back, and it had drawn its line in blood, memory, and love. Restraint is not the absence of strength. It is the decision of where to place it. The silverback stood in the center of the clearing, the infant pressed against his chest, his massive frame rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Every instinct written into his body screamed for dominance, for destruction, for the swift elimination of the threat that had crossed a line no outsider should ever cross. Yet he did not move. Not forward, not back. He stayed. Around him, the troop held their positions. No chest beating, no screaming charges. Just presence. Their bodies were tense, ready but controlled, like a storm held in the lungs of the earth, waiting for permission to break. The humans could feel it. The guide had gone still, his hand no longer hovering near the flare. He understood something now that training manuals never taught. This was not a moment to assert authority. It was a moment to respect judgment. The silverback lowered his head slightly and looked down at the infant. The baby's small fingers clutched into his fur, bearing its face against warmth and familiarity. The silverback adjusted his grip, one thick finger, supporting the baby's spine with surprising delicacy. He made a soft, almost imperceptible sound, something between a breath and a memory. Grief lived there. Not fresh grief, not loud grief. The kind that settles into muscle and bone and waits for moments like this to awaken it. The loss of the previous infant had not faded. It had shaped him. It had taught him what violence could not undo. The silverback lifted his gaze again, fixing it on the humans. His eyes were dark, focused, intelligent. There was no frenzy in them, no blind rage, only evaluation. The man who had grabbed the baby whimpered softly, still pressed flat against the ground. He could not lift his head. He could not look at what stood only feet away from him. He felt judged in a way no human court could replicate, by something that did not need language to communicate consequence. The silverback took one slow step forward. The air tightened. The guide's chest seized his instincts, screaming warnings he refused to act on. He knew that if the silverback charged now, nothing would stop him. There would be no time, no heroics, only aftermath. But the silverback stopped. He did not close the distance to the man. Instead, he angled his body, placing himself squarely between the infant and the humans. The message was unmistakable. You are not the priority. You are not the center. You are not worth the baby's fear. Behind him, one of the adult females shifted, stepping closer, her posture calm but firm. Another positioned herself slightly behind the silverback's left side, watching the tree line. The younger male remained back, scanning, ready to intercept anything that moved too fast. This was not chaos. This was command. The guide felt his throat tighten. "They're waiting," he whispered to the ranger beside him. "Not for orders, for understanding." Minutes stretched. Sweat ran down backs unnoticed. No one dared wipe their face. The jungle itself seemed to lean in listening. The silverback exhaled deeply, then slowly lowered himself to one knee. The movement was controlled, deliberate, his balance never wavering. The infant remained cradled safely against him. The crowd gasped despite themselves. A kneeling silverback was not weakness. It was something far more dangerous to misunderstand. He placed his knuckles on the earth, grounding himself, grounding the moment. His breathing steadied. The baby relaxed, its small body softening against him. This was the choice. Not mercy born of fear, not hesitation born of confusion, restraint born of memory. The guide realized then that the silverback was not choosing between attack and retreat. He was choosing between repeating loss and protecting what remained. The man on the ground sobbed again, louder. This time the sound cracked and broken. It rippled across the clearing like a pebble dropped into still water. The silverback's eyes flicked toward him briefly. A warning rumbled from deep in his chest, not explosive, not loud, but unmistakable. The man choked the sound back instantly, pressing himself flatter into the dirt. The silverback looked away. "You are not worth my attention." That more than violence shattered the man completely. The guide swallowed hard. He had spent his life teaching tourists about danger, about respecting distance, about following rules. But no lecture could match what was happening now. This was not fear enforced by threat. It was fear dissolved by understanding how close destruction had come and how intentionally it had been denied. A ranger's radio crackled again, quieter now. Backup was near. Tranquilizer teams were ready. The guide shook his head slowly, deliberately. "Not yet," he murmured. "If we interfere now, we break the trust he's offering." The silverback shifted again, rising smoothly to his feet. He turned slightly, presenting his back to the humans, for just a second longer than necessary. It was not vulnerability. It was dismissal. He stepped toward the edge of the clearing, the infant still secured against him. The troop adjusted immediately, tightening their formation, closing ranks around him. One female reached out and briefly touched his arm, a grounding gesture. He responded with a low-sound acknowledgement without breaking stride. The guide's breath trembled. "He could have killed him," he said quietly. "He chose not to." The ranger nodded, eyes wet. "That's not instinct," he replied. "That's judgment." Before disappearing into the foliage, the silverback paused. He turned his head once more, casting a final look over the humans. Not with hatred, not with forgiveness, with memory, as if imprinting this moment into something that would not fade easily. Then he moved. The jungle swallowed him and the troop in layers of green and shadow. Leaves rustled, branches bent, and just like that, the clearing was empty again. No roar followed, no victory display, no punishment delivered. Only the echo of a choice that would haunt every witness long after the sound of it faded. The guide sank slowly to his knees, the weight of the moment finally breaking through. Around him, others did the same. No one spoke. No one moved. They had seen what power looks like when it does not need to prove itself. They had seen a silverback choose restraint, and nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The fight did not begin with a charge. It began with a sound, low, distant, almost mistaken for thunder rolling through the canopy. The kind of sound that does not announce anger, but presence. It traveled through roots and branches, through memory, through bloodlines older than the clearing itself. The silverback heard it immediately. His body stilled mid-step. The infant shifted against his chest, sensing the change. The troop felt it too. One by one, they stopped moving, their loose formation tightening without panic, without noise. This was not fear. It was recognition. Another male was nearby. Not from this troop, not bound by the same history. A rival presence drawn by disturbance, by human noise, by the unnatural spike of chaos that had rippled through the forest moments earlier. The jungle does not ignore disruption, it answers it. The silverback turned slightly, angling his body so the infant was fully shielded. His muscles tightened, not to attack but to brace. His breathing slowed. Every instinct screamed for confrontation now, not with humans but with the one challenge that could not be ignored: dominance. The guide sensed it before he saw it. The air felt heavier, compressed like a held breath, stretched too long. The ranger beside him whispered something he did not hear. All his attention was fixed on the tree line opposite the path the silverback had chosen. Leaves trembled. Then a shape emerged. Another silverback, slightly smaller, younger shoulders, high and posture rigid. His entrance was deliberate. He did not rush. He wanted to be seen. His chest rose and fell quickly, eyes sharp, scanning the clearing, cataloging weakness, opportunity, ownership. The humans froze. They had expected rage from the silverback who held the baby. What they had not prepared for was this, a test that had nothing to do with them at all. The rival beat his chest once. A single sharp declaration. The troop reacted instantly. Two females moved closer to the infant carrier. A younger male shifted to the flank, watching the newcomer's feet. His hands, the tension in his shoulders. No screams. No scrambling. Order. The silverback met the rival's gaze. This was the fight. Not fists. Not teeth. Not yet. A long moment passed where neither moved. The rival took a step forward, chin lifted, breath loud. The silverback did not answer with sound. He answered with stillness. He lowered his head just enough to look through his brow, a posture that radiated certainty. I am not here to prove myself. The rival hesitated. Confusion flickered across his face. He had come expecting chaos, humans screaming, a troop scattered, an opportunity to seize control or steal an infant in the confusion. What he found instead was cohesion, calm, a leader unmoved by provocation. He beat his chest again, louder this time. The silverback finally responded, not with violence, but with placement. He took one step sideways, positioning himself squarely between the rival and the troop, between threat and life, between instinct and consequence. The infant whimpered softly. That sound changed everything. The silverback's focus snapped inward, his grip adjusting, his body angling protectively. The rival noticed. His eyes flicked to the infant, then back to the silverback. Interest sparked. Dangerous interest. The guide's heart hammered. He knew what came next in the wild. Infants were leverage. Infants were weakness. But the silverback did not retreat. He advanced. One step, not a charge. A statement. The ground seemed to shift under the weight of it. The rival stiffened, surprised. He had expected defense. He got command. The silverback stopped 3 paces away, close enough to make retreat costly, far enough to keep control. His lips pulled back slightly, not in a snarl, but in a warning that carried no theatrics. This is not your fight. The rival answered with a guttural sound, half challenge, half uncertainty. His muscles twitched, calculating. He took a step to the side, testing angles, testing reactions. The troop mirrored the movement, instantly adjusting their positions without instruction. The guide realized then that he was watching something humans rarely see: without bloodshed, collective intelligence in motion. The rival circled. The silverback pivoted smoothly, never exposing his back, never shifting the infant from safety. His breathing remained steady. This was not rage driving him. It was responsibility. The rival lunged, not full force, a feint. The silverback did not flinch. That was the mistake. In a blur of motion that seemed to bend time, the silverback surged forward, not wildly, not blindly, but with precision honed by years of restraint. He did not aim for the face. He did not strike the head. He slammed his shoulder into the rival's chest, driving him sideways into the dirt with controlled violence. The impact thundered. Leaves exploded into the air. The rival hit the ground hard, stunned, more than injured. Before he could recover, the silverback was over him, one hand planted inches from the rival's neck, his weight pinning without crushing. The infant was still protected, pressed high against the silverback's chest, out of reach. The jungle went silent. This was the moment everyone expected, the killing blow. It did not come. The silverback leaned in close, their faces inches apart. He exhaled slowly, deliberately, his breath washing over the rival's face. The sound that followed was low, vibrating, unmistakable. Leave, not as a plea, not as a threat, as a fact. The rival's body went rigid. He felt it, the certainty, the control, the absence of fear. He understood that this was not a leader fighting for dominance. This was a protector enforcing a boundary. The silverback released him, just like that. He stepped back, never turning away, never breaking eye contact. The rival scrambled to his feet, pride-bruised ribs aching. He hesitated once, chest heaving, then backed away into the trees, disappearing as quickly as he had arrived. No pursuit followed, no roar of victory. The fight was over because it had never been about rage. The silverback turned back to his troop. The tension drained from his posture in visible waves. The infant stirred, then settled again, safe. The guide realized he had been holding his breath. What he had just witnessed would never make headlines. There would be no viral clip of the moment restraint triumphed over bloodshed. No dramatic charge, no dramatic ending. But it was the most important fight of the day, because it proved something deeper than strength. The silverback had fought instinct itself and won. He led his troop forward again, deeper into the forest, the rhythm of their movement unbroken. The jungle closed behind them, swallowing the clearing and its shaken witnesses. Only then did the guide sink to the ground, his legs no longer able to hold him. That wasn't anger, he whispered to no one in particular. It was the quiet understanding of what mattered most. And that understanding had changed everything. When the last echo of the roars dissolved into the canopy, the jungle did not rush to fill the space. It held still as if listening to itself. Leaves hung motionless. Insects delayed their chorus. Even the light seemed to hesitate before settling back into the clearing. Miko moved first. He did not look at the humans again. He did not check for pursuit. He turned toward the trees with a certainty that came from having already made every decision that mattered. Ka followed the infant, pressed safely against her chest, her steps quick but controlled. The troop closed in around them, not in fear, not in victory, but in quiet formation. No signal was given, none was needed. They disappeared into green. Only then did the clearing feel empty. Diego let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands were shaking now, the aftermath catching up with him all at once. Emily lowered her camera, the red recording light still blinking. For the first time since the moment began, she chose not to turn it back on. Jason remained where he was sitting in the dirt as if gravity itself had increased around him. His sunglasses were gone. His bravado had evaporated completely. He stared at the place where Miko had stood, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "I thought," he began, then stopped. No one asked him to finish. The Rangers moved in carefully, not with urgency, but with respect for the space, for what had just passed through it. Tariq knelt beside Jason, checking him for injuries, his voice calm and professional. Diego stood back, eyes still on the tree line, as if half expecting the jungle to speak again. But it didn't. It remembered instead. By nightfall, the reserve was sealed. The clearing was marked and left untouched. No footprints were erased. No debris was moved. What had happened there was not treated like an incident. It was treated like a boundary. Emily sat at base camp later that evening, reviewing her footage frame by frame. She stopped repeatedly at the same moment, Miko standing still, massive and trembling, choosing not to strike. Not retreating, not surrendering, just holding. She realized something then that unsettled her more than the violence ever could have. That pause hadn't been confusion. It had been control. Jason was flown out before dawn. He didn't argue. He didn't look back. Wildlife authorities would deal with the consequences later, but whatever punishment came next would never match the weight he already carried. He had crossed into a world that did not belong to him and been spared by something stronger than anger. In the days that followed, Miko's troop stayed hidden. Rangers caught glimpses from a distance movement on ridge lines, a dark shape beneath thick vines, Ka's silhouette, with the infant clinging tightly, always close. Miko walked slower now. Not injured, changed. He stayed toward the back of the formation, watching more than leading, his presence less about dominance and more about vigilance. The jungle adjusted around them. Trails shifted, other animals kept their distance. It was as if the forest itself had learned where not to intrude. News of the incident spread far beyond the reserve. Experts debated it endlessly. Was it grief, memory, learned behavior? Trauma? Each explanation felt incomplete. None could fully account for what people had seen, a creature capable of immense force choosing restraint when every instinct suggested otherwise. Diego refused most interviews. When he did speak, he used the same sentence every time. "He didn't forgive us," he said. "He understood us." That distinction mattered. Emily returned to the clearing one last time before leaving. She stood at the edge, careful not to step inside the air, still carrying something intangible, like the echo of a held breath. She thought about the infant, about how close that life had come to being another absence carried by the jungle. She thought about Miko, about the way he had placed his body between danger and what remained of hope. Weeks later, the troop was seen again in full. Miko emerged first, not charging, not hiding. He stood at the edge of the trees, the infant now riding confidently on Ka's back, small hands gripping fur, eyes bright and curious. The rest of the group followed, relaxed, grounded whole. They did not approach the clearing. They passed it, as if the place had served its purpose and no longer needed to be revisited. A small marker was placed near the ranger path. Not a monument, not a sign for tourists, just a simple reminder for those who work there. It read, "Respect is not distance. It is restraint." Emily published her final piece weeks later. She cut out the screams. She cut out the chaos. What remained was the pause, the choice. The moment the story could have gone one way and didn't. Viewers responded differently than they usually did. There was less outrage, more silence. People sat with it. Parents wrote about loss. Veterans wrote about restraint. Grief counselors shared the clip with patients who couldn't find words for what they were carrying. Some stories don't ask to be shared. They ask to be remembered. Deep in the jungle, Miko rested beneath a canopy of broad leaves, the infant curled safely against Kay, the troop breathing in a slow, synchronized rhythm around them. He closed his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in something closer to peace. The jungle did not forget what happened. It absorbed it. And in doing so, it reminded everyone watching, from screens, from fences, from the fragile distance between species, that strength is not measured by what you are capable of destroying. Sometimes it is measured by what you choose not to. When the jungle finally exhaled and the echoes of fear faded into memory, what remained was not the image of danger, but the weight of understanding. This was never just a story about a tourist's mistake or a silverback's strength. It was a mirror held up to us, forcing us to confront how easily curiosity turns into entitlement, and how often we underestimate the emotional depth of the world beyond our own species. At its core, this story teaches us that power does not always announce itself through violence. Miko could have ended everything in seconds. His size, his instinct, his grief, all of it justified rage. Yet what defined him was restraint. In a moment where chaos ruled and fear demanded reaction, he chose control. That choice reshaped every outcome that followed. It saved a life. It prevented another loss. And it left a lasting imprint on everyone who witnessed it. The first lesson is humility. Nature is not a backdrop for our experiences. It is not a stage built for our photos, our stories, or our thrill. Every creature within it carries memory, emotion, and consequence. When humans forget that when we step forward without listening, we don't just risk harm. We reveal how little we've learned. The second lesson is empathy. Miko's reaction was not random. It was informed by grief, by memory, by love that had already been tested and scarred. His restraint was not weakness, it was understanding. This reminds us that behavior, whether animal or human, often carries a history we cannot see. What looks like aggression may be fear. What looks like distance may be protection. Judgment without understanding is how tragedy begins. Another powerful truth emerges from this story. Leadership is not about domination. In the jungle, leadership is often portrayed as force. But here leadership was demonstrated through protection, through positioning oneself between danger and the vulnerable. Miko did not lead by fear. He led by responsibility. And that lesson resonates far beyond the forest. In our families, our communities, and our societies, true leadership is revealed not in how loudly we act, but in how carefully we choose. This story also challenges the idea that grief weakens us. Miko's past loss did not turn him into a monster. It made him cautious, deliberate, aware of what was at stake. Grief became a guide, not a trigger. It shaped restraint instead of rage. For many of us carrying our own losses, this is a quiet but powerful reminder. Pain does not have to harden us. It can deepen us. Perhaps the most important message is, this love and moral choice are not uniquely human traits. We often draw a line between us and them, believing empathy, restraint, and sacrifice belong only on our side of the divide. This story dissolves that illusion. In one frozen moment in the jungle, a silverback showed more restraint than many humans ever do when provoked. And that truth is uncomfortable, but necessary. When the jungle fell silent, it wasn't because the danger had passed. It was because a lesson had been delivered. We are visitors in this world, not owners. Every step we take into nature is an agreement spoken or not to respect what was there before us and what will remain after we leave. The jungle remembered. The question is whether we will. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see the natural world differently, help us continue sharing stories like this. Subscribe to the channel to support more powerful, meaningful content that explores the deep emotional connections between humans and the wild. Your support gives these stories a voice and reminds us all that sometimes the greatest lessons come from listening instead of acting.